Hey, welcome to a new video. Ching Xi was a legendary female pirate during the Qing dynasty in China. After her husband's death, she took command of an impressive fleet of 1,800 pirate ships and 80,000 men. She is said to have been even more famous than the pirate Blackbeard. But how did she do it? Well, she was wise enough to know that to rule over everything her husband had left behind, order needed to be established. So she devised a strict code of laws that would unite the pirates under the Red Flag Fleet. This code remained undefeated, despite challenges from the Qing dynasty, the Portuguese Navy, and the East India Company. Ching Xi was born as Shi Yang in a Tanka family, and she grew up among people living on Chinese sailing ships along the coast. In 1801, she met the formidable commander of the Red Flag Fleet and married him. Together they conquered the seas, but the main reason she's considered the most successful pirate of all time is that she was able to walk away with great wealth, a noble title, and several ships and sailors. Unlike Blackbeard, who met a different fate, she lived her days in freedom and wealth. The remarkable life of Ching Xi even inspired the character Mistress Ching in the 2007 film Pirates of the Caribbean: At World's End.
Are you new to this channel? Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And before we start, also like the video.
Saito Musashibo Benkei is known in Japanese history as a legendary fighting monk. But it's thought that this is not just a legend, because according to some historical records, Benkei was already 2 meters tall when he was 17 years old, and his appearance was enough for many enemies to be afraid of him. Benkei was a master of several weapons, including a wooden hammer, a hatchet, and a sword. Among other things, he was the protector of the castle bridge, and is said to have managed to stop 999 samurais. However, at the 1000th battle, he lost. Saito was so impressed by this that he decided to serve under him for the rest of his life. We all know that there is no excuse for Vladimir Putin's deeds in the Ukraine, but his upbringing may have something to do with his current actions. As a child, he lived shabbily in a rat-infested house with his parents and 2 other families, and they had no water, electricity, heating, or even a toilet. Putin was basically a street kid, and many other children bullied him. His parents were physically and mentally traumatized by World War II, and they were never there for little Vladimir. He was basically left to himself, and there was no one to protect him. It's safe to say that the effects of the war, poverty, and other childhood traumas only accumulated, and by the time he started school, he became a bully himself. He decided to learn judo to defend himself and eventually joined the KGB. Maria Licciardi was an Italian mastermind who was a prominent figure in the Camorra organization in Naples, one of the oldest criminal organizations in Italy. She was the first woman to lead the Licciardi clan and played a key role in the Second Digliano alliance. Maria is known by many names, including La Madrina or the Godmother. Others called her La Piccolina or the Little Girl because of her small stature. But among the women of the Camorra, she was La Principessa, or the Princess. She took over the clan's leadership in the most chaotic times, but she handled everything with wisdom and strength. Maria effectively maintained stability despite challenges and power struggles by forming an alliance with other 20 Camorra clans, allowing her to gain complete control over Naples. It was for the wrong reasons, but the local population respected her for providing employment in the area. From 1933 until her arrest in 2001, she held significant power in Naples. While in prison, she still retained control over the operations of the Licciardi clan. After her release in 2009, she was reportedly the head of the Second Digliano alliance, earning her the nickname Tanta Maria, or Aunt Maria. The police even described her as a natural-born leader with extraordinary intelligence. Desmond Doss was a corporal in the United States Army, and the first conscientious objector to be awarded a Medal of Honor. A conscientious objector is a person who does not want to follow certain rules in the military, and a Medal of Honor is the most prestigious award you can get, and is only given to people who have acted bravely in combat. Desmond was a person who did not like violence, and so would not carry guns. Instead, he tended to the wounded soldiers. During the Battle of Okinawa in 1945, he saved as many as 75 men. The 2016 film Hacksaw Ridge is actually based on his story. Definitely a must-watch. Griselda Blanco was born on February 14, 1943, and was an influential figure in the Colombian drug trade. She operated from Colombia to cities like Miami, New York, and California. Griselda was known as the Black Widow and played a significant role in the illegal drug trade in the underworld of Miami from the 1970s to the early 2000s. Some claim she had ties to the Medellin cartel, one of the most infamous cartels ever. Griselda was a mother of 4 children and broke norms in the male-dominated world. She eventually disposed of all 3 of her husbands, earned a substantial amount of money, and lived a lavish life as the leader of a major criminal organization. She is believed to have been involved in at least 200 murders, but some estimates put the number at over 2,000. Her ruthless reputation preceded her, and Netflix is currently producing a limited series titled Griselda that will portray her life, starring Colombian-American actress Sofia Vergara.
In the year 1162, Genghis Khan, one of the greatest conquerors of all time, was born in Mongolia. According to legend, the boy was born with a blood clot in his right hand, which was coded as an ominous sign of things to come. He lost his father when he was only 9 years old, and his mother, who was actually kidnapped by his father, was cast out of the village with little Genghis, whose real name was Temujin, and had to somehow survive. The young Genghis Khan has always been described as a weak and scared child, but as he grew up, he learned how to use his charisma to win allies. His ability to bond people around him helped to unite nomadic tribes, and in doing so, he built a truly powerful army. The method Genghis Khan and his army used when attacking villages was very cruel and bloody. They never left anyone alive and burned all villages to the ground. According to history, more than 40 million people suffered under Genghis Khan and his cruel army.
Irina Gatimachuk's story is both heartbreaking and terrifying. She was born in Russia in 1972, and she had a difficult childhood, marked by the destructive influence of alcohol in her family. In the 1990s, she moved and met her husband, Yuri, and they had 2 children. However, Irina couldn't escape her drinking problems, and her husband stopped giving her money, leading her to extreme measures to satisfy her cravings. In June of 2000, Irina chose her first victim, an elderly person, and thus began the start of her secret reign of terror that lasted for 8 years. She often walked on the streets with a bag containing a hammer or an axe. She posed as a friendly social worker, gained the trust of the victim, entered their homes, and then attacked them before stealing their money. According to the police, her loot was only a small amount, all of which was spent on alcohol. In total, she acquired $1,500 over the 8 years. Because of her crimes, the police also referred to Irina as the Satan in a skirt. Kudalun was a Mongolian woman and the daughter of Kaidu. Kaidu was a great-grandson of Genghis Khan, so you can probably imagine that this woman was a real warrior. She was also known as the princess and pride and glory of the Mongolian horde because of her strength and skill, especially in wrestling. However, her father Kaidu decided that the man who managed to beat her at wrestling could marry her. But the story goes that more than 10,000 men failed to win over her. Kaidu had 14 sons, but he wanted his daughter to be the leader because he trusted in her capabilities. Even the explorer Marco Polo, who had met the princess once, had written many things about her. One of the most famous crime duos must be Bonnie Elizabeth Parker and Clyde Chestnut Barrow, better known in popular culture as Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie was born on October 1st, 1910 in Rowena, Texas. Before becoming infamous, she actually had dreams of becoming an actress in her youth, especially because she was exceptionally beautiful. However, no one could have predicted that she would lead a life filled with troubles. She met Clyde in 1930 through a mutual friend, and as most historians describe, Bonnie fell deeply in love with Clyde, influencing her to embrace the lifestyle he led. Some say Bonnie became bored with her life and saw Clyde's life as an adventure. Together, they became notorious American outlaws, robbing banks and small stores during the Great Depression. However, not all their crimes went smoothly. At one point, they had a failed robbery that left Bonnie behind bars. While awaiting her trial, she occupied herself by writing poems, and many of them were about her relationship with Clyde.
Kim Jong-il, the father of Kim Jong-un, comes from a family of nationalists, and no wonder his parents were super strict and had an extremely strange parenting style. His official biography states that he was born in a secret military camp on Paektu Mountain. Kim was only 4 years old when World War II ended, and it was difficult for the boy to deal with all the consequences the war brought to his homeland. Another shocking event happened to little Kim when his brother drowned in a family swimming pool. When Kim was in school, he was already into politics, and that was all he was interested in. He was a shy boy, but later he joined a community that had a lot to do with the study of Marxist political theory. His father was a dictator, and Kim became his father's successor, and shortly after his father's death, he was proclaimed the supreme leader of North Korea.
Enadina Arellano Felix de Toledo is a Mexican drug baroness who ran the infamous Tijuana cartel with her brothers, making it one of Mexico's most violent criminal organizations. Initially, Enadina served as the cartel's accountant, working behind the scenes to manage their illegal money. After her brother Eduardo's arrest in 2008, Enadina assumed the leadership of the cartel. However, when she was younger, she wanted nothing to do with the family business. She was interested in beauty pageants and had dreams of becoming the carnival queen of Mazatlan in 1977. However, she had to give up her dream when it became known that her brothers were wanted by both American and Mexican authorities. She initially pursued a degree in Guadalajara, but joined the family business in the mid-1980s, where she became her brother's financial advisor. In fact, authorities labeled her as the financial brain of the Tijuana cartel. According to the Mexican government, she was not involved in her brother's wars, but rather in forming alliances and making money.
Simo Hayha is a Finnish soldier known as the deadliest sniper of all time. During the Winter War of Finland and the Soviet Union in the years 1939 and 1940, he managed to shoot a total of 505 enemies. Historians estimate that Simo had to fire more than 13 million bullets, which is also a record. The bizarre thing is that the world would not have known about him if researchers had not found his diary, which described his adventures. Although Simo was very famous during this period, few details were known about the events, so his diary helped historians fill in the missing facts. In one day, Simo even said to have shot more than 25 Russian soldiers. His sniping skills became so well known that even Russians feared him and labeled him the White Death.
The Night Witches are an all-female night bomber group that became a crucial asset for Russia during World War II. While Russian women were already bravely fighting on the front lines, they initially weren't allowed to join the Soviet Air Force and fly planes in the war. This prompted Major Marina Roskova, one of Russia's top pilots, to personally convince Joseph Stalin, the country's leader, to train women and let them fly. Fortunately, Stalin was a big fan of Marina, and he agreed to her proposal, leading to thousands of female applicants. They were called the Night Witches because the sound of their wooden planes resembled a broom sweeping. Their planes were too small to be detected by radar or infrared locators, and they wouldn't use radios, so radio locators couldn't find them either. In a way, they were like ghosts, challenging to spot or track. They underwent training to operate planes that dropped bombs on enemies, using only maps, compasses, and flashlights. They also flew close to the ground without parachutes.
The name Saddam actually means one who confronts, and many experts blame his mother for turning him evil. His father disappeared when Saddam was just born, and his older brother died of cancer when he was only 12. Saddam's mother was completely devastated by all these events and sent him to Baghdad with his uncle, who was a retired army officer. But eventually he came back to his mother, who then remarried. However, his stepfather was violent and did not treat Saddam well. The boy ran away from home when he was only 10, and this probably made him a murderous tyrant. As he grew up, he considered his uncle a role model and followed his political beliefs, which also influenced who he eventually became. As he grew older, he officially joined his uncle's party, and this is where his political path began.
Aileen Wuornos' story makes you wonder whether criminals are born or made. Her life story is so shocking that filmmakers wanted to turn it into a movie titled Monster, released in 2003. Aileen had a difficult childhood, and her parents married young and later divorced. She never knew her father, Leo, who also committed his own gruesome crimes. Aileen had always had a troubled upbringing, and her experiences worsened as she entered her teenage years. People around her abused her, and close family members like her grandfather mistreated her. Between late 1989 and late 1990, 7 murders occurred in Central Florida within a 12-month period, with Aileen later identified as the perpetrator. The 7 victims were said to be white men between the ages of 40 and 65, and she claimed her actions were in self-defense. During the investigation, stolen items linked to her first victim, Richard Mallory, were discovered in pawn shops. It turned out that Aileen recklessly sold or pawned her victim's stolen possessions, exposing her trail and leading authorities to her door.
Genghis Khan has gone down in history as one of the greatest conquerors of all time. Genghis Khan actually came from nowhere and managed to build the greatest empire in the world. To accomplish this, he had to unite the Mongolian nomadic tribes, which was no easy task at the time. Once he had won their trust, Genghis Khan conquered much of Central Asia and China. It's thought that at one point he had more than 125,000 horsemen. And so, the Mongols were able to conquer about 11 to 12 million square kilometers of land. History books often describe his actions as greedy and cruel, but Genghis Khan didn't just use fear to rule his people. In fact, he allowed religious freedom, did not encourage violent punishment, and even designed the first international postal system.
Another woman who courageously entered the battlefield in the Soviet Union during World War II is Lyudmila Pavlichenko, known as Lady Death. She earned the distinction of being the most successful female sniper in world history, with a total of 309 confirmed kills using her rifle. Hailing from Belayet Surkov in Ukraine, she was always resilient and constantly proved that girls could be just as capable as boys. Her interest in firearms led her to excel in a marksmanship class, earning her a sharpshooter badge. Afterward, she worked at a local arms factory, and when the invasion occurred, she volunteered for the infantry. But to her dismay, they initially assigned her to be a nurse instead. This didn't sit well with her, so she set out to prove her skills by taking out 2 enemies with precise shots. After that, she joined the 25th Rifle Division of the Red Army as a sniper, becoming one of the 2,000 female Soviet snipers. Only 500 of these brave and skilled women survived the war, including Lyudmila, and she quickly gained recognition, even being welcomed as the first Soviet citizen at the White House.
Heinrich Himmler was the Reichsführer SS, and in history, he is called the evil architect of the Holocaust. He was an ordinary farmer, but grew to become Hitler's right-hand man. As a child, he was a boy who loved to play the piano, collect stamps, and play war games with his older brother Gebhard. When his brother joined the Army of Armed Citizens, he wished he were old enough to join as well. While studying at university, he already disliked Jewish people, and they irritated him when he saw them in cafes. He was only 22 years old when he officially joined the Nazis.
Juana Barraza Semperio, born on December 27, 1957, is a Mexican serial killer. She is known as the Little Old Lady's Killer, and was sentenced to 759 years in prison for the murders of 16 elderly women. Authorities and media couldn't even determine the total number of her victims, but estimates suggest it must have been around 42 to 48 cases. In 2003, she began entering the homes of elderly women, posing as a grocery helper or a government official conducting checks. Once inside, she used items like pantyhose or phone cords to strangle her victims. Initially, the police thought the murderer had been a man. Desperate to apprehend the perpetrator, the police arrested the wrong individuals, including an innocent nurse who matched the descriptions in the composite sketch. According to a crime expert, she had a lot of anger towards her mother, which led her to target elderly women. This is a photo of Joseph Drexel Biddle in 1943, where he ordered all his Marines in training to attack him with bayonets. And you won't believe what happened next, because he managed to disarm all these men. In fact, Anthony was a master of hand-to-hand combat. He participated in both World War I and World War II by training soldiers. He joined the army in 1917 and became a captain in just 2 years. The man also wrote several books on combat methods and how to learn the skills he had. Later, he decided to set up his own military training camp, where he trained about 4,000 men. These training sessions would be very exhausting because he taught his students countless combat techniques, from weapon use to jiu-jitsu. Phulan Devi, also known as the Bandit Queen, came from an extremely impoverished background in Uttar Pradesh, India. Like most girls in their community, she was married off at a very young age of 11. Unfortunately, her husband was a ruthless man who mistreated her and did not honor the agreements he had with Phulan's parents. In 1979, Phulan was abducted by a gang of bandits who mistreated her in the same manner as her husband. However, one of the men in the gang named Vikram Malla saved Phulan. Vikram cared for Phulan and even taught her how to use a gun. Together they robbed the rich to feed the poor, and even exacted revenge on those who had oppressed Phulan in her past. However, Vikram was killed by another gang member, and Phulan escaped, finding another gang that treated her better. She convinced them to help her seek revenge on her old gang. This is when she became known as the Bandit Queen. After her intense revenge, she surrendered to the police and spent 11 years in prison. Upon her release, she became a women's rights activist, and even got elected to the Indian parliament.
Osama bin Laden's father was a billionaire and was married 22 times. Little Osama was one of more than 50 children. His mother divorced his father, Mohammed, when Osama was just born. His father was very dominant, and he wanted all his children to live under one roof. His parenting style was very strict, and he had some extreme rules for his children. They had strict discipline and had to follow strict religious and social codes. Mohammed had his own daily routine, and he forced his children to follow it as well. He was never nice or loving to his children, and he treated them like adults, and he also wanted them to be responsible for everything. Osama was only 13 when he lost his father, and he also got married early, when he turned 17. His wife, by the way, was related to him.
To the residents of Correggio, Italy, Leonarda Cianciulli appeared to be a friendly, caring mother and a kind neighbor. However, beneath this facade, she had a very dark secret. In 1939 and 1940, she murdered 3 women in her town, turning their bodies into soap and tea cakes using caustic soda. She served the meaty tea cakes to unsuspecting visitors, and even shared them with her son. Her actions were driven by superstition, especially when her son Giuseppe decided to join the Italian army. She believed that human sacrifices would protect him, and therefore committed these gruesome crimes. In addition to being a shopkeeper, Leonarda was also somewhat of a fortune teller, which she used to lure her victims. However, she was caught when the sister-in-law of one of the women began to search for her. During the investigation, Leonarda confessed to the crimes and provided chilling details of her actions.
Alexander III is called the Great for a reason. Like Genghis Khan, he too is one of the greatest conquerors in history. In fact, Alexander found the greatest empire in ancient times. He was born in Macedonia as the son of King Philip II. Alexander was a brilliant child, and when he was 12, he managed to tame a wild horse. This was also the moment that the horse became his horse for life. Alexander is also said to be a student of another legendary figure, Aristotle, who is said to have had a great influence on him. Alexander possessed not only courage and strength, but also a great intellect. For these reasons, some stories claim that he's actually the son of the Greek god Zeus. Alexander achieved his first victory at the young age of 18, and for 15 years, he was never defeated. Unfortunately, he died at the young age of 32, and historians are still not quite sure what exactly happened to him.
In the early 17th century in Italy, when women had limited rights, a woman named Giulia Tofana grew tired of the system. She devised a cunning way to fight back and liberate women from abusive marriages. She was known to many as simply a woman who sold cosmetics and healing ointments. She had knowledge of countless women mistreated by their husbands, so she cleverly started a pharmacy where she sold aqua tofana disguised as face cream or lady's oil. However, aqua tofana was a deadly poison, developed around 1630 in Sicily. It's whispered that she perfected the poison inherited from her infamous mother, Tofania d'Amato. The poison was openly sold as both cosmetics and a religious item in small bottles adorned with the image of St. Nicholas. It's said that more than 600 people, primarily husbands, perished due to the poison. Women looking to end their troubled marriages would purchase the cosmetic product and secretly add it to their husband's soup or tea.
Mao Zedong was only 13 when he was forced to work full-time on his family's farm. This clearly did not please him, as he was more interested in modern politics and studying modern literature. He rebelled against his parents' authority and left his family because he thought it unfair that his father arranged his marriage at the age of 13. Leaving his family, he attended high school in Changsha and was 18 when he began to take an interest in revolutionary ideas. Mao decided to join the army and was a soldier for 6 months. He eventually became the president of the People's Republic of China, and it is estimated that more than 15 to 55 million people died under his leadership.
Belle Gunness earned the nickname Hell's Belle as a Norwegian-American serial killer, active in Illinois and Indiana from 1884 to 1908. She's suspected of taking the lives of at least 14 people, mainly men that she lured through personal ads. Some estimates suggest that she could be involved in up to 40 murders, making her one of the most prolific female serial killers in all of history. Belle owned a pig farm in LaPorte, India, which later played a key role in her crimes. She first murdered 2 of her husbands and some of her own children before mysteriously disappearing in 1908. Her crimes included insurance fraud, and she poisoned her family to collect money for it. Afterward, seemingly developing a liking for what she was doing, she started seeking men through newspaper ads, enticing them to her farm with promises of love. These men would arrive with money and then vanish without a trace. In 1908, her house burned down, revealing 4 skeletons. In addition, more than 40 men and children were found buried around the farm.
Jack Churchill was a British Army officer who fought in a very unusual way during World War II. His colleagues called him Mad Jack because of this. Because while everyone else fought with rifles and pistols, Jack only had a handbow and a Scottish broadsword. His motto was, "Any officer who goes into action without a sword is not properly dressed." Jack was always an adventurer who lived his life like there was no tomorrow. In 1936, he left his military unit in Burma and went to Kenya to work as a newspaper editor and male model. In between, he also became an actor and even starred in 2 films. In 1939, he had to return to the British Army for World War II. During the war, he used a handbow in addition to his sword, and believe it or not, he even managed to take out a German enemy with it. This put him in the history books as the man who fought in World War II without guns.
During the Victorian era in the United Kingdom, unmarried women who gave birth faced discrimination from society. To avoid humiliation, they would pay a nurse to care for their babies. This widespread practice was mainly carried out by nurses known as baby farmers. One of these baby farmers was Amelia Elizabeth Dyer, who adopted hundreds of babies. Born in 1837 in Bristol, she decided to become a nurse after having to care for a mentally ill mother. After learning about the practice of baby farming from a friend, she advertised her services in newspapers and presented herself as highly respectable. Many mothers sought her services, paying her around £8 to £10. Initially, she did actually care for the babies with the money she received. However, later on, Amelia began neglecting them even worse. The true reason for this was never really known. Some argue that she abandoned the babies to keep more money for herself. Others say that she was mentally unstable and had been admitted to various clinics during her life. She continued her gruesome crimes for about 30 years, and authorities suspect she may be responsible for the deaths of over 400 babies.
Pol Pot was a dictator in Cambodia who headed the totalitarian Khmer Rouge regime that caused many people to suffer. He was born to relatively wealthy parents, and he was the 8th of their 9 children. The family owned 50 acres of rice fields, so they never experienced poverty. When he was 5 or 6 years old, he was sent with his older brother to receive French education. He was never really a good student, so he failed all the exams and had to go study at a technical school in Phnom Penh. A little later, he went to Paris and started studying radio electronics. In Paris, he decided to join the French Communist Party, where he met a group of Cambodian nationalists. It is estimated that 1.5 to 2 million people died of starvation, disease, and being overworked under his leadership.
Mary Manning worked as a maid for Lady Blantyre in London, where she became fascinated by the lavish lifestyle and began dreaming of a luxurious life for herself. In 1846, she traveled to Boulogne with her employer and met Patrick O'Connor, an elderly wealthy man who became interested in her. But Maria already had another suitor at the time, Frederick Manning, who told her he would inherit an estate in the future. She saw that both men had the potential to provide her with the life she desired, and thought it was wiser to choose Frederick because he was younger. She married Frederick but maintained contact with Patrick, realizing that Frederick would never inherit an estate. Dissatisfied with her choice, she plotted to murder Patrick. In August 1849, she invited him for dinner, and while he was washing his hands, she shot him in the head. Frederick joined her, and together they buried him under the kitchen floor. Afterward, Mary went to the man's house and searched all his possessions and goods. This case is also known as the Bermondsey Horror, and marked the first instance in which a man and a woman were executed together in England since 1700. Their crime garnered public interest, and people even paid to get good seats during their execution. Even the famous novelist Charles Dickens was present and wrote a letter about it. Ching Xi was a Chinese female pirate who terrorized the South China Sea from 1807 to 1810. But she was not just any woman. She's also described as the most successful pirate in history, even more successful than the famous pirate Blackbeard. After her husband fell overboard in a storm, she took command of the Red Flag Fleet, a confederation of more than 1,800 pirate ships with about 80,000 men. Just to give you a comparison, Blackbeard led only 4 ships with 300 pirates, so it's safe to say that Ching Xi was someone you wouldn't want to mess with. Her ships came into conflict with Portuguese Empire and the Qing Dynasty of China. To prove that she was not a weak woman, she used a strict code of conduct that made the pirates not question her and fear her even more. Samantha Lewthwaite, also known as the White Widow, is on the list of the world's most wanted criminals. She was married to Jermaine Lindsay, a terrorist who carried out bombings in London. Authorities suspect Samantha played a role in the deaths of more than 400 people. She's also believed to be responsible for a host of other activities. To this day, she remains at large, primarily sought after by various international law enforcement agencies, including Interpol. Therefore, it's not surprising that Samantha belongs on this list as one of the most dangerous women.
Joseph Stalin is known as one of the greatest dictators ever. His father was a poor shoemaker, and his mother was a maid. Joseph was the only child in their family who eventually survived, but instead of his parents loving and caring for him, he was not treated well. His father drank a lot, and he was mistreated by him. When poverty hit hardest, he sent his family to a factory in Tiflis to work. Joseph was only 5 years old at the time. Throughout the rest of his childhood, the boy lived with his mother in the home of a priest, and his mother worked hard to help him get an education and not end up poor. When he eventually became premier of the Soviet Union, he is said to have been responsible for the deaths of over 20 million people.
Ilse Koch, born on September 26, 1906, was a German war criminal who became infamous for her gruesome actions during World War II. Her husband, Karl Otto Koch, was in charge of Buchenwald, one of the largest concentration camps. Although she didn't hold an official position in the Nazi government, she gained a notorious reputation for her alleged deeds. During her trial before an American military commission in 1947, Ilse Koch gained worldwide attention. She was accused of selecting prisoners with intricate and interesting tattoos, so she could use their skin to create items such as lampshades, gloves, and covers for a family photo album. Witnesses also claim that she enjoyed wearing provocative clothing to lure and seduce prisoners, and if they looked at her, she would use a whip. Such acts were seen as her amusement in the camp, and she earned several nicknames, including the Witch of Buchenwald and the Beast of Buchenwald. Napoleon was a general and dictator of the French Revolution. He was a leader who, like Alexander, conquered much of Europe. He rebelled in 1799, and in 1804 he seized the throne and made himself emperor. When Napoleon was young, he loved to read, and perhaps it was his love of knowledge that contributed greatly to his successful strategic actions. Before conquering a country, he first studied its history, geography, and culture. His exquisite preparations almost always led to success. Over the 60 battles he engaged in, he lost only 7. Countess Elizabeth Bathory is known as one of the most infamous royals in history. Despite living in the 16th century, her chilling legacy continues to endure today. Elizabeth ruthlessly ended countless lives, especially those of young girls, as she believed that consuming their blood would preserve her youth and beauty. Initially, she targeted her own maids, but when her thirst for blood was not satisfied, she turned to young rural women. Families of high social standing even sent their daughters to Elizabeth to learn proper manners and ladylike behavior, unaware of the fate that these girls would face at her hands. According to sources, she was responsible for more than 600 deaths, earning her a place in the Guinness World Records as the most prolific female murderer. Some historians are still uncertain about the veracity of all the gruesome details about Elizabeth, especially those comparing her to a vampire. However, more than 300 witnesses confirmed her sadistic behavior.
It's hard to believe, but when Hitler was 8 years old, he sang in the church choir and even thought about becoming a priest. As a child, he was very smart and popular with other children, but the one thing he didn't like was the strict discipline in school, and this was the reason why he had huge conflicts with his father, who was controlling and dominating. Hitler was afraid of him and loved his mother much more. His childhood was not easy when all his siblings died, and when the same happened to his brother Edmund, it affected him the most. The young Hitler always wanted to be an artist, but his father didn't think this was a good idea, and after the death of his father and mother, he moved to Vienna. When he finally became the Reich Chancellor of Germany in 1933, he turned it into a dictatorship.
Maria Mondel was an Austrian war criminal who rose to a high position during World War II. According to sources, she was responsible for the deaths of more than 500,000 prisoners. She joined the SS in 1938 and impressed her superiors, which led her to gaining more power and eventually being assigned to her own camp. There, she had complete control over hundreds of thousands of female prisoners. Survivors who witnessed her actions described Maria as extremely cruel. She forcibly separated mothers from their children, left them with cramped cells without food or water, and physically assaulted those who disobeyed her. Due to her outbursts of anger, severe punishments, and brutal mistreatment, she earned the nickname the Beast. She went to great lengths to find reasons to act violently against her prisoners. In 1945, Maria was captured by the US Army and brought to trial. Who do you consider the most dangerous woman on this list? Let us know in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos we made, click one on the screen or take a look at the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.